Okay, yeah, thank you, Chirag. So as I said, my name's Lee Ford. I'm a solution architect based in the UK. I mainly work in Microsoft Teams and generally around the development side, so adding extensibility to Teams, things like bots and apps and messaging extensions and things like that. And today I'm going to talk about 3 different ways that you can make a Teams bot and the different approaches and pros and cons to each approach. So with that, I will get started. So first thing before we get started is, don't worry, it's a developer only session. Don't worry if you're not a developer. We're not aiming here to kind of go deep into the code and go through line by line on exactly how you build a bot. The idea here is that I will present you with some options, and then you can kind of, based on those options, you can move forward and make your first bot if you haven't made one already. So the agenda is, what is a Teams bot? So quickly we'll cover what a Teams bot is if you're not familiar, and then we'll go into the different ways that you can make a Teams bot. So what is a Teams bot? So a bot is a way of communicating with a service through dialogue. Now the service could be a application that you already built. It could be an API that you're querying. It could be maybe a customer service team. So when we're talking about service here, we're talking about something sort of outside of Teams. So you're not just communicating with another user in Teams, you're communicating with the service. So one example I always like to talk is about is when you're on Amazon and you need to speak to the customer services, it will guide you through, how can I help you? Is it about this order? Is it about that order? Do you need to speak to a representative? All that sort of thing. Yeah, that's what a bot is, and that's what you can put into Teams. And the way a bot generally works is it is an automated tool. So the idea is that you almost build the logic to the sort of the branching paths and all the questions that might get asked and all the answers that can be returned. You build all that first, and then it's an automated process. So the idea is that when someone asks a question, it can work out for itself what the answer needs to be. Now you can also escalate to what I call a real person, i.e. a human being, and in that scenario, the idea is that the automated part would kind of navigate enough information to work out whether it can help or not, and then escalate to someone to speak to them. So when it comes to bots inside of Teams, we have what we'd call a channel, or a Teams channel. So within a team you have channels, and within a channel you could have a bot, and that's one way of doing it. That's generally used where you've got a shared conversation going on. So it wouldn't be something really where you'd have like you wouldn't, it's more like, let's say you're querying like a service queue or something like that, and everyone needs access to it and visibility of the conversation that you're having with the bot. Whereas you can also have something what they call a personal app, and that sits on the app menu, and where that's used is where you have a personal conversation. So it might be asking sensitive information, or it might be a conversation that you don't want to be made public within a Teams channel, and that's the other option you have. So you've got personal apps, you've got Teams channel, and both of those accommodate bots in different methods, and I'll go into the 3 options that we have and which can be used where. One thing to bear in mind is it's typically a text-based conversation. You can do audio, video. You can also make it look a bit better. So in this example here, we've got adaptive cards, so it's kind of just making it look a bit nicer than just plain text that's just one line of text or a wall of text. It doesn't look very nice, or it's a bit difficult to read, whereas with this we can format the card and add images and emojis and whatever else, and it just looks a lot nicer than just plain text. So what does a Teams bot comprise of? So one thing to bear in mind is that Teams itself doesn't host any of the bot logic. You don't upload the bot to Teams. What you may upload is what they call an app manifest or an app package, and that's where you have an application, effectively a description of what the application is, what it does, what permissions it requires, and where that bot is located. But the bot itself doesn't sit within Teams. So if you want to make a bot and you've got an existing application somewhere, or you've got an existing workflow that you want to use, you can still do that. You don't have to go, oh, right, well, I've got to build this completely separate bot just for Teams. If you've already got a bot that's accessed through a web page, there's nothing to stop you then tailoring that and also accepting conversations from within Teams. You don't have to have a separate bot that sits inside of Teams. So the way it works is we have a Teams app that someone clicks on within Teams or within a Teams channel. They click on the bot. That goes to what they call a bot framework registration. That is held within Azure, generally within your own Azure, and that points at where your bot lives. So in here, I've just got a couple of example types of bots, but the idea here is that we have a Teams client that talks to the bot framework. The bot framework then tells, kind of redirects the Teams message to where the bot lives, and then when the bot responds, goes back to the bot framework goes, oh yes, this is in relation to the conversation with user X, and then forwards the response back to user X. Okay. So we'll get into 3 ways to make a Teams bot now. So it's 2, but technically it's it's 3, but it's technically 2 in the sort of the true sense of what a bot is. One is bot-like, but it's not officially a Teams bot. But there are certain scenarios where that could be useful over making a sort of a fully fledged or technically a real Teams bot. But we'll go into those now. So the first option is Power Virtual Agents. So Power Virtual Agents are part of Power Platform. So if you're familiar with Power Automate or Power Apps or something like that, or even something like Logic Apps in Azure, you will feel right at home. The idea here is that it's a low code or no code solution. We're not having to open up VS Code or some programming tool to make something. The idea here is that it's all visual. You can use something called Bot Composer and write a bit of code if you need to implement it into Power Virtual Agents, but the idea is generally at that stage you probably wouldn't use Power Virtual Agents, you'd use something else. So the idea here is that I've got a simple idea for a bot. Maybe it's actually quite complicated, but I've got a general outline of I know what the bot needs to do, but I'm not a developer, or I don't have time to develop something. I just want to build a bot now. Power Virtual Agents is a great way to do that. So PVA is the glue that joins the Power Platform to a Teams bot. And the idea here is that you've got Power Platform that has Teams capabilities. So the Power Virtual Agent can connect to the Teams side and can also connect to the Power Platform side. So for example, if you have a Power Automate flow that you want to trigger within the PVA, you can do that. And likewise, obviously, you can connect the PVA to Teams. It is not limited to Teams. So as I mentioned previously, you might have your bot, you maybe want to expose it in a web page in addition to Teams, or maybe in a WhatsApp chat, or there's lots of different bot framework channels, and I think most of them, if not all of them, are supported within a PVA. So as long as it's capable within bot framework, you can assign your PVA to those different channels. Obviously, in this particular session, we're generally focusing on Teams, and the idea here is obviously Teams is one of the supported channels. And like I said, the beauty of using Power Virtual Agents is you can build something in minutes. So when I was building a demo for this session, it literally took me sort of 10 minutes at most, and I had a working example built end to end and deployed into Teams. And I was amazed how quickly and easy it was to build something. And that's what we're going to get into here a little bit. So the components of a PVA, similar to a couple of slides ago, we have the Teams client, and the Teams app that someone clicks on that opens up the Power Virtual Agent. That then connects to the bot framework. Bot framework says, ah, yes, this is a Power Virtual Agent. I'll redirect you to the correct Power Virtual Agent. Now, in this scenario, we don't actually have to worry about the bot framework registration or the PVA, like any sort of resources or provisioning or anything. Literally, you go into Power Virtual Agents, I want to create a bot. The bot's going to be associated to Teams, and it does all the magic for you. You don't have to go, I need to create this, and I need to ask permission for this, and then someone needs to grant me permission to that. The idea here is that you can just create it yourself. No, similar to if you wanted to create your own Power App or you wanted to create your own Power Automate flow, you're not having to go off and request a load of permission and provision a load of things before you can get started. The idea here is that you click a few buttons, and within a minute or so, the bot's ready for you to build. So some basics around Power Virtual Agents. It is a conversational bot. As far as I'm aware, I haven't, unless this has changed, it's not audio or video calling capable. So it is purely a text-based or chat-based conversation. So you type something in the text box, it will then respond to that text message. You can't call the bot or anything like that. So the way a bot logic for Power Virtual Agent works is you have something called a topic. A topic is effectively a dialogue flow. So in here we have an example. We've got two trigger phrases. One is what's the weather, the other is just weather. That triggers this topic. The topic then has a question, and then it replays a message, and maybe asks another question, and maybe another question, and maybe you even have branching paths based on that. If you answer this to this question or answer that to that question, you ask a different question. And the idea is that it starts off very narrow and then kind of widens out and then comes back in at the end to the sort of the conclusion. And that's what a topic is. It's almost like a conversation or potential outline of what a conversation could be with all the permutations. One thing that you can do is you can link the topics together. So if you have a topic that is, let's say you have a final topic, which is maybe like asking a survey to be filled in or to go to a web page or something like that, and you always want that to be the final thing that is mentioned when the conversation ends. You can link that topic to this topic. So maybe this weather topic we have here then triggers a final topic at the end, which is maybe a feedback survey or something like that. So you can kind of create the topics as small components and then link them together. There is a license that's involved, so you can't just do this for free. Like anything in Power Platform, there is a cost associated to it. I won't go into the exact cost or anything like that. It may change per region, but the idea here is that you pay for a bundle of conversations. So a conversation is that's me asking what the weather is and getting a response back. That's a conversation. There are some other subtleties to it. So for example, if the conversation lasts more than 60 minutes, that would count more than one conversation. Things like that do add to the cost, but or add to how many conversations are consumed. But I'm not really going to dive deep into the licensing in this session. You can integrate with external services, such as an API. For example, in an example I'm going to show in a minute, there is an API that is being called, and the way we trigger that, similar to a Power App where we would, let's say, trigger a Power Automate flow, we are triggering a Power Automate flow within a Power Virtual Agent, and these flows are associated to the Power Virtual Agent directly. So when you go into your the Power Platform admin portal, you don't see these flows. These are associated directly with the PVA. And as I mentioned previously, where you can have a team or personal app context, in this scenario we have both. We've got a personal app, and we've also got a team context. So that's the first option. That's kind of the easiest option, I would say, of the three. That kind of you can get up and running in minutes. This one is a little bit more complicated. This is where you're making your own bot using bot framework SDKs. And the idea here is that you're more of a developer. You have coding experience. Maybe you have an existing application that you want to add a bot to and expose that in Teams. That's the second option. So in this scenario, we have something called the Bot Framework SDK. Bot Framework SDK makes it a lot easier for you to implement a bot using Bot Framework into your code. So you're not having to start with a blank piece of paper. We can use an SDK and build something out from there. So prerequisite is you're going to need to know, obviously, a programming language to do it. So at the moment, there's C#, there's Java, there's JavaScript, TypeScript, and Python. I think you can also use your own language and use the REST APIs, but that'll be a lot more work than using one of these SDKs. So similar to a Power Virtual Agent, it's not limited to use within Teams. You can embed it into a web page or other different channels that Bot Framework supports. It is more involved. It is more complicated. It is more complex, but at the same time, it is a bit more flexible than Power Virtual Agent. So, for example, if there's something within a Power Virtual Agent that you can't do, and the associated Power Automate flow can't do, that's where something like creating your own bot using code can come in and kind of add some additional tasks to whatever you're looking to do. So the components are very similar to Power Virtual Agent. In this scenario, we have, rather than having a Power Virtual Agent on the right-hand side, we have a code. So this is just where your code runs. In this case, I've got an Azure function. It could be a web app. It could be an existing app that you have. You can host it in Amazon. You can host it in Azure. You can host it on your own server. It doesn't really matter. The way it works is the bot framework. You just point the bot framework registration at your bot. And as long as your bot is accessible from the bot framework registration, that's fine. It doesn't need to run in Azure. You don't need to use Microsoft services. It's up to you where you put it. So the overview on making your own bot is you can do audio and video in addition to chat. It's not just limited to chat only. Similar to what we have with PVA, where we have topics, we have dialogues, and dialogues allow you to effectively orchestrate a similar to a topic. You can kind of have a branching path, and this is the first question that gets asked based on the answer. You can do this question or that question and kind of break it out. It's a lot more complicated to build than a Power Virtual Agent branching path, but it is also quite flexible, but it's not for the faint of heart. That's talking from experience. From a cost perspective, there is no licensing, but you do need to obviously pay for the licensing cost to host your bot somewhere. So if like I say, if you've got an existing application or an existing hosting platform, there would be no additional cost. But if you're having to build something especially for this, then obviously you just need to factor that cost into any decision that you need to make. Obviously, from an integration point of view, you can integrate it into any API or any code or any application that you want, because it's your own code. The sky's the limit in that respect. You're not limited to, let's say with something like a Power Virtual Agent where you've got certain amount of connectors, and obviously you do have HTTP connectors and things like that. But in this scenario, you can kind of do whatever you need to do. Similar to a Power Virtual Agent, you can expose this inside a team or a personal app. So depending on the use case for the app, it both will work when you're making your own bot. So the wildcard is something called a webhook, and this is the one that's technically not a bot, but it behaves like a bot. And from a user perspective, it's a little bit different how you use it, but it does get the job done. And I would say that a webhook is kind of a middle ground between a Power Virtual Agent and having to spin up a whole bot and all the dialogue and all the complexity that goes with it. This kind of sits in the middle. You still need to be able to write the application. You don't have to rely on a bot framework SDK, and you can kind of use whatever language you want. But it's sort of a middle ground really. And the way this works is you have something called an outgoing webhook, and an outgoing webhook is when that bot is or that this webhook is mentioned within Teams, it then sends a what they call a callback to your code or your bot, and then your bot responds. This is perfect for a answer question and answer scenario. So you have a question, or we have a request, and there's a response. It doesn't work, you know, answer one question and then it asks you a different question. It's not going to work like that. That's not how it's intended to work. It's more, in this scenario, get me the current weather, and that's it. It gives you the weather. That's kind of the complexity in a nutshell. So components here, we don't actually have a bot framework connector in this scenario. We have, or bot framework registration, we just have a webhook. So the Teams outgoing webhook effectively calls the code directly. There's no Azure or anything like that that you have to create, or any permissions. And the beauty of this is that you can build your code completely separate from Azure or Microsoft or anything, and then you don't even need to have an admin grant you access to access the webhook from within your team. So you create the team webhook, and then you point it at your code, and that's it. It's great in that scenario that you don't have to rely on anyone to deploy this. So if you're, let's say, you know, you don't have access to the keys to your environment, but you do have an idea that you'd like to make, and you have access to a team, then this is a great way of getting started. So webhooks can support chat. They are very basic interactions. It's just a question, it's just an answer. There's no complexity more than that. There is no licensing. Again, there is a cost for hosting this code. Having said that, it's probably going to be pretty minimal, but it's just something to bear in mind. Again, you can integrate this any API or anything that you would want to integrate into your webhook. It's your code, you can build however you want. Now, this is a subtle difference. A webhook is associated to a team. So when you create a team, you create the webhook inside of a team. That means you can't then use this as a personal app. So this is not useful where you may want to ask sensitive information, or whatever the conversation is visible for everyone in the team. So you wouldn't want, if it's something that you wouldn't want shared with the wider team, webhook is probably not the way to go. So in summary, we've got PVAs, we've got webhooks, and we've got bot framework. The complexity arrow there kind of dictates, you know, how easy they are to implement. The idea here, I mean, sort of the TLDR is, if you want to build something really quick and you've got a great idea and you just want to get on and build it, PVA is the way to go. You don't need to be a developer. You can kind of just get started and not even know what a bot is really to begin with. It's dead simple. Webhook's great if you've got a really basic need, just a question and an answer. You want to build something really quick. You don't want to have to worry about bot framework and all that's involved with that. And then the bot framework is kind of the really complicated, complex, but also flexible option. So all three are valid, and all three work within teams in different ways. So I'm going to quickly show each of them in hopefully play to the demo gods that it lets me. But I'm just going to show all three scenarios in Teams, and then we can we can cover them off. So the first thing is, if we look at Power Virtual Agents, I've created a chatbot called WeatherBot, and I'll quickly, if it loads, show you. We have something called topics, like I mentioned, and the topics are where you have a trigger, and then it works through a flow based on what questions are asked. And so in this scenario, I have a trigger called "What's the weather?" That then asks me what the weather is. I then take the response and then go and get the weather, which is inside a Power Automate flow, and then I return the weather details to the user. If I just show you this now in use, so if I just type weather, where do you want me to check the weather forecast? Okay, so I'll just put Birmingham. Okay, and then apparently it's sunny in Birmingham. It looks to be fairly sunny. So yeah, that's working, and that's got the information from a weather API and return the information back to Power Virtual Agent user. Now, this is text only. You can create adaptive cards to make it look a bit fancier, but there is a you have to use something called the bot composer, which is an additional tool to Power Virtual Agents, and you do need to kind of get your hands dirty with a little bit of code in that scenario, but it is possible. What I'm trying to show you here is what's possible out of the box within Power Virtual Agents only. Okay, so that's the first option. Second option is I go to my conversations, is a bot framework bot. So in this scenario, I have something called a weather bot, and this is then hosted in an Azure function. And what this should allow me to do, if it works, is I can type in a location, and then it will come back with a response to the weather. So again, it's 19 degrees, and this is an adaptive card, and this obviously looks a bit nicer than just bullet point text. Like within Power Virtual Agent, I can kind of customize it and add a forecast and add some nice pictures and such, and template the whole thing. So that's within a bot. If I've got time, I'll show you sort of the underlying inner workings of it, but I'm struggling with time here. So let's just get to the final option. So the final option is a webhook, and the webhook works a little bit differently. If I look at in here, you'll see I've got a weather, which is an outgoing webhook. Okay, so an outgoing webhook works similar to a bot, so you have to mention it. So if I just typed in here London, it doesn't work because it's not. I haven't asked the bot or the webhook to actually do anything. So if I mention it, all being well, it should come back with a weather forecast. Praying to the demo gods. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it has come through. So now I have that through, and that's a webhook. So it works similar to the bot, but you have to mention it, and it's within a Teams context. So it is kind of works similar, but there is a kind of a different use case for it, I guess. I think I've got a couple of minutes, so I'm just going to quickly go through the code for each one. And like I say, I'm not going to go drill down, but it's just kind of just a general overview of what we have here. So for the weather bot, we're effectively getting the weather information from an API. We're then creating a weather data object, and then we are then responding to that with the bot framework. We're sending what we call an activity back to the user. If we don't find the location, we send an error. Okay, and then if we look at the webhook sample, it's very similar, but actually in this case it's just a single page or a single file. Similar, we're validating that the webhook is come from the right place and it's okay to send a message, and then we do a similar thing. We do a lookup of the data and then send a response back to the user. And if I now bring up the slide deck, I think we are done. Oh, so some samples. So we have both the weather bot and the webhook weather bot. Both samples are on GitHub. So if you want to have a look and see how I've done them in more detail, you can go do that. I've also got a YouTube recording for how the webhook works in Microsoft Teams in more detail. So with that, I think that is my session, and happy to answer any questions if there are any.